Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Tuesday, March 12th webinar for Abacus. And this afternoon's webinar is going to be all about accounts payable in the Abacus accounting side of the program. My name is Perry Paxton Lafferty, and I'll be your host today as we go through the AP drop-down menu here in the Abacus accounting program. So that's what we will be covering. Hopefully, y'all have signed up for that specific class. So there are a couple little things here. In the GoToWebinar panel, there's a spot for questions. Okay, so if you do have questions, please go ahead and type them in there. And as we go through this, hopefully I can see questions and answer them, or answer them at the end as time allows us to. Also, if you happen to think of a question in the middle of the night, you could always email it in to webinars@abacusnext.com, and we will be happy to answer it. So if you don't think of one now and you do later, please let us know. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen and hear my voice, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. Also, I should say that copies or recordings of this webinar will be available after the webinar. I believe they send them out the next day, so I think that you will receive a copy of them via email tomorrow. So you can look forward to that. Not just once, you get to listen to this as many times as you please. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, obviously, we are talking about accounts payable today, which deals with the different check writers in the Abacus accounting program. But before we jump into this too far, we've kind of got to talk about our vendors, because vendors are the names that we use when we are going to be writing these checks. So they actually put vendors over here under the setup because it technically is a part of the setup of the program. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and open this up under File, under Setup, go all the way down to the very bottom for vendors and click on that option. And when you do this and you open this up, what is listed here are all of the names that you have already chosen to be vendors. So this is an existing list. So there are two different ways to add to this list. All right. Let's say that you have a client that needs a refund at the end of the case, or at any particular time you need to write a check to them. Well, this client already exists, of course, because they have been set up in Abacus Law. So there is a shortcut way here to pull them from law and actually make them a vendor here in accounting, so we can write checks to them and keep a record of all checks written to that particular vendor. And that is, you come into this screen, and what you're going to do is uncheck this little box down here in the left-hand corner that says Show Billing Vendors Only, because what we really want to see are all names in Abacus Law. So I'm going to come up here and start typing my name just to show you what I mean. So I'm looking for my client, Mr. Albright. Okay, I'm typing, it goes red because it cannot find his name in my billing and accounting database. Red means can't find him. But if I uncheck this box, it's going to look in Abacus Law as well and let me know if it can find any names that similar to what I've typed in here. So you can see that now Mr. Samuel Albright does come up here. So his name was in Abacus Law. It just simply hasn't been pulled over yet to be able to utilize him to write checks to. So once I've unchecked this box and his name does appear, what I can do is simply come over here and click on the little button here that says Set Up Vendor. So I just click that button. It asks me, am I sure I want to do this? Well, yeah, that's why we're doing it. We want to have him be a vendor. So I say yes, and that's it. That's all you have to do to create a vendor out of an existing name. So basically, we're just pulling that name up, unchecking the box to see if it's in law, and then setting him up as a vendor. Now, of course, that doesn't work for everybody, because there could be people that just don't exist in your Abacus Law Next. Okay? So if that is the case, we need to go into law and set them up. All right, so I'm going to click on the add button. All right, because let's say now I'm thinking about somebody else. Let's look for the name Office, let's see here, Extravaganza. I can't spell okay, it can't find it, right? So now if I click on add, because I already had my button turned off here, if I click on add, it's going to open up my Abacus law. Okay, I need to tell it that I'm adding a vendor. Oh, if I could type, it might help, wouldn't it? All right, and it's going to set up my new name screen for me. So all I have to do is start typing in the name. Okay, so that was because it did not exist. I couldn't just do the shortcut and say set up a vendor. I have to actually come in and fill out the screen. So let's come in here. Ganza. Okay, and if it is a person, of course, we're going to push it between the last name and first name lines. We'll parse it out correctly. But for any type of business, we're just simply going to place that on the last name line. Now, of course, it'd be nice to have an address in here so that it prints out on my check if I am going to physically print checks in my office. So you want to make sure you fill this in. I'll come down here. Okay, there we go. And of course, you want to make sure you take care of your contact information. I'm very bad at typing, so I'm going to skip that part right now. We want to make sure vendor is the classification, and we hit save. So it's not hard to set one up from scratch, but you do have to fill in a few fields. Okay, there we go. And this is the important question here. Am I establishing this name as a vendor for accounting purposes? Well, yes, that's exactly what we want to do, because this will give us some defaults that will really help us out down the way. All right, so I'm going to say yes here, and you get this message popping up on your screen when you're saving your new name that is set up as a vendor in Abacus Law. So I'm going to say yes, and it gives me my little default screen is what I call this guy. So this is where you can come in and set up some default information that will make it so much easier to write checks. Now, do you have to do this? No. Even in some cases, it's really not relevant, such as perhaps a credit card. If you're setting one of those up, some of this isn't really going to work for that. But if it can work, okay, if we can utilize this, if it makes sense to fill in these defaults, I would say definitely do so. So let's see what these defaults are so we know whether we want to choose them and what we should enter. So first thing first, are we going to allow our Abacus accounting program to have multiple invoices paid on one check? In other words, if I have 2 months worth of bills that I owe to Office Extravaganza, can I go ahead and put them on one check? That's what this is asking. If that is a good thing, okay, I would leave the check mark in place because you can save money. You aren't using a separate check for every single invoice. This, of course, is out of your operating account. For your trust account, a lot of people get a little nervous here, so they'll uncheck this box so every check coming out of trust is on its own separate check, every invoice being paid. That's totally up to you. Abacus can process your 1099s for you at the end of the year. All right, if so, you're going to put a check mark in this box if this vendor requires a 1099. Okay, and if this vendor is providing legal services, you're going to check that as well because that's another box on the 1099 that you're going to want to fill out. Okay, the comments line is for your eyes only. It does not go on the check to the vendor or even on the stub. Now, if there is a federal ID number, this is where you're going to put it. Also, this could be a Social Security number if this person is going to get a 1099. Okay, so this could be the federal ID or the Social Security number. Firm account number, that's only if you have an account with the vendor. In this case, maybe my office extravaganza company has actually given me an invoice. I'm sorry, an account number. Okay, because that's how they identify who my firm is by my account number. Well, you're going to want to put that in here if you have it. So when you write your checks, this will appear on the stub of the check. And that way, when they look at it, they type in that number, they know who you are, they credit your account accordingly. Okay, not all vendors have account numbers, so this doesn't necessarily have to be filled out. Now, the defaults, if you ask me, are the most fun because I can put stuff in here and then I have less work to do when I'm physically having to process my checks. So the first one is the default expense account number. And this is the way where you can make sure that everybody's using the proper general ledger expense account number. Okay, put it in here and it will populate to the screen when we actually write a check. So this is our chart of accounts with the little arrow for the lookup. Okay, and if you all haven't seen this yet, you're in for a lot of fun here. But basically, I've customized mine a bit, so it looks a bit strange, right? It's not the actual one that comes with the program. But you can find what you're looking for, hopefully, by simply starting to type in the name of the account you think you want to use. So in this case, Office Extravaganza will be supplying me with office supplies. So I'm going to go ahead and use that account as my default. So now I never have to think about this crazy looking chart of account number again. It will simply default to my screen. All right. Now, here, this takes us down a little different path. Okay. If this is a firm incurred type of expense, in other words, office supplies we charge to the firm, we really can't charge those directly to a client in most cases. So there would be no client expense code. All right. If this vendor was supplying goods or services for a client and I want that expense to go on their bill, the client's bill, so I do get reimbursed for it, this is the client expense code we would use so we know that it will appear on the client's bill. So this will identify what's going on the client's bill. So looking this up, okay, they're all different kinds of client expense codes. Obviously, Office Extravaganza, this is not a bill we're going to charge over to a matter. All right. But if this was the clerk of court, perhaps I'd want to use filing fee so that not only do I know what account number to charge it to off of my GL, also it will know what client expense code to use on the client's bill. Okay. Now, just to walk that through totally, because obviously this is office supplies, if this vendor was supplying goods and services for a client, such as the clerk of court or a process server, okay, or an investigator that you're charging directly to the matter, this account number here will be the one and only client expense code, or client cost advanced expense account. Client cost advanced expense. Okay, that is the one account on your chart of accounts where all the client incurred costs are charged. This is the debit account that we will use for all of those. Okay, so that right there, that's the account that would be here if this was something like the clerk of court. But for the others that are for the firm, we're going to find the kind of expense that it is. Maybe this is the Florida bar, and this is, dues for the attorneys in the firm. Well, there's a different expense code for that. So you need to, apply these accordingly. If you have any questions on these, I can help. So, make sure to send in your questions, and I'll be happy to help. So back to our defaults. If the amount is always the same, you can go ahead and fill that in too. A good example of that might be your rent. If your rent payment every month is the same, well, of course, your default expense account number would be the rent expense, and then this would be the actual amount. In this case, if it varies all the time, I would not put one in because it may, these come through to the check. And if I don't check that amount, if I don't look at that screen and catch that, it could write the check for the wrong amount. So if it varies, leave it 0. But if it's always the same, you could go ahead and fill it in. Now, the default description, you might be able to get that partially filled in too. Okay? Even if it was for a client, you could say something about filing fee for a client and then leave the name blank. So when you go to write the check, all you have to do is put in the name in the description field. All righty? Okay, so that is all about setting up vendors. We accessed Abacus Law, we filled out our name screen, and then we got the extra default screen to fill out. And those are the steps required to set up a vendor. Now, I know it's a bit of a pain, but if you could just, get a few in there a day, it's going to make life much easier for you when you go to write checks. So that's where I'd like to go now, is to jump over under AP for real and talk about the 2 different check writers we have. This first one is what I call the down and dirty check writer. This is the simple check writer. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it usually gets the job done. Oops, if I could hold still, it would help. So we're going to click on the demand check writer, and the screen pops up. Now, first thing we see is our operating account will always be in place here. You never, ever, ever, ever use this to write trust checks. All right? Trust, what do we know about trust? Trust is its own island. Everything you need for trust is on this island, including they have their own demand check writer option here. So trust is done on the island of trust. No more about trust here. This here is the quickest way to see how much the account balance is, what the balance in the account is. One thing Abacus will allow the operating account to go in the red. Say, I didn't get my client payments in yet, and we're kind of running close to that 0. Well, you could write checks and go in the red in operating, but never, ever in the trust account. All right. So now we get down here to the good stuff. And first, the check number auto. Well, that's not really true. We're actually going to tell it the check number when we get down here to the print button. All right, but that's just kind of, reminding us, yeah, we're going to have a check number sooner or later, unless this is an online transaction. If this is something that was done online, and I know more and more things these days can be paid online, you're going to check this little box and all these words here: ATM, debit card, bank charge, transaction. That really just means online transaction. So if it was done online, we put a check mark there. That then tells the program, hey, don't use up one of our check numbers because we have checks. We paid for those checks. We don't want to throw a check away because it used up the number. Abacus will assign a transaction number that ends in the letter A. Therefore, you see it on your bank reconciliation report, and it will be different than the check number. So when you're looking on your bank statement, you can identify one from the other. So if it is truly a check, do not check the box. But if it is not a check, you do check the box. How's that? All right. So now we come down to our payee, and the lookup for the payee is way over here. So there we go. And we come here, and this is just another browse. You're probably very used to these in Abacus. I start typing the name of my vendor, and it will find it in here, and I double-click on it, and it pops it into place. I did leave it at 0, so I have to put in the dollar amount. I should mention the date. It does default to today's date, but you can backdate or forward date things with the arrow if you need to. But we can see our office supply account number. That crazy looking number is already there with the description of the account, so I know I have the right one. My description came through, so you can see that will save you time and definitely accuracy. So all I have to do is put in the dollar amount, okay, and it puts it in place. There is a memo line that physically prints on the check, but that's the only place it goes. Okay, does not appear on the stub. It just appears on the face of the check down in the left-hand bottom corner. Since this is an expense for the law firm, I am not going to fill out a matter ID. nor this client expense code, because I can't send this bill over to a matter to be paid by my client, right? I'm not charging this to my client. This is a firm incurred expense. But I bet you get an idea, because those fields are sitting here, that if this was a check for a filing fee or something like the sort for a client, we would fill out the matter and we'd fill out the expense code. But let's finish this one up, and then if we have time, I'll quickly do one of those. All right, so invoice number, this is a box here that if you have an invoice number, it'd be a great thing to fill it in, because Abacus has a little safety feature. It won't allow you to pay the same invoice number twice. So if I do put in an invoice number, it can help me later when I enter the next invoice. I know when I worked in the real world, I couldn't pay FedEx on time, and thank goodness I put in those invoice numbers, because when I tried to put one in again, because I got another notice that I owed it, it would say, hey, this one's already in the system. You don't want to enter this again. So that is a little feature that really can save your bacon every now and again. Okay? But if you don't have one, you don't have one. All right. So now I am going to come down here to print. I have the check mark turned on. So I am pretending that this is an online transaction. So you see what happens here. I press the print button, and it puts in a transaction number with the letter A after that. I don't have to, I'm not going to actually put in that number. Okay? It's going to do it for me. So this is not in my control. These are not, real numbers from the bank. It's something Abacus has to make up to make this different from a check. If this was not that, I do not put that check mark in that box. And then when I click print, it actually goes to my next check number. And it will keep up with your check numbers, so you're looking at that check you put in the printer. This is the check you're going to print right now. Okay. Some people get a little confused with the word next. This is the one in the printer that we're going to pay our office extravaganza bill with. Here's the date that's going on the check. You choose your appropriate printer here if you are printing checks. If you are handwriting checks or backfilling checks, in other words, somebody took this check and just dumped the stub on your desk, say, oh, thanks, okay, here it is, you got to enter it. You don't need to print that, so you could just check that box and hit the post button. Okay, let's see. It looks like somebody has a question, so let's go over here. Lisa can no longer hear the speaker. I hope everyone else can. Lisa, my only advice, let me type that in, would be to go ahead and dial back in if you can, because I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, hopefully, Lisa, you will get that. Let's see what we have here. Okay, you will get that message. All right, looks like we have another question. Let's see what that is. If you want to print the online payment in the demand check writer just on paper, okay, well, let's see. If I was doing this in chart and saying it was an online check, let's do a filing fee. Okay, so I'm going to say clerk of court. There we go. This would be a client incurred cost. Okay, it's going to charge it to my client cost advanced account. I'm going to come back here and down here and put in the client or the matter I'm doing this for. Oop, I better put in the dollar amount. Got to do that. It won't let me write a check for zero. I charge it to my matter. Okay, Cedar Lake. All right, it has my expense code for my filing fee already in there. So now if I say this is an online payment and I hit print, okay, you can uncheck this box and still have something print to plain paper. Now, everybody does know that Abacus cannot go out to your bank account and transfer money, okay? That does not happen with accounts payable. The APX, which Abacus will go collect money from clients charged to their credit card, but we cannot use AP and go out and access a bank. You're filling in the work that you actually, that's going to the bank. We're not doing the bank transaction at the exact same time here. So if you don't have this button, let us know. I obviously am on version 23.27.0C. If you're not on that version, you may want to look into getting an update so that I know I have this button, as you can well see here. So if you don't have that, let us know. Okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to say do not print. I'm going to tell it to post so I don't go through my printer and make a lot of background noise. And that is using the demand check writer. All right, now, there is an additional check writer, obviously, the two-step check writer. This is truly a bookkeeping tool. This is where you could come in and enter all the bills we get in the mail this week. Okay, say on Friday, that's my job. I take all the mail, put in all the bills, and we pay bills physically on the 22nd in this office. All right, so I would want to enter all my payables and post them. And then on the 22nd, I would come in and physically print those checks or, run them through the check writing process. All right, so this is a true put it in and pay it later kind of thing. All right, so let's look at this step. This has a few extra features that the demand check writer did not have. First of all, this is a posting function, another big bucket. If you've been to any of my classes, I call these buckets because posting is a very strange word in my mind. So I put things in my bucket and then I dump them out. So posting is the act of dumping these out so then I can actually go and print checks. So how do I put something in the bucket? How do I get my payable in here? I click on add. This screen is similar to the demand check writer. It's in a little different order. But basically, it's asking us all the same stuff, so we got to fill that in. Over here, this is the big difference here, is you have a due date. So I know when I worked in the real world, money was very tight in my firm, and I basically would print a list and say, okay, boss, here are the people we owe. Who do we pay? So I could utilize my due date there to print my report showing all payables through a certain due date. So I knew when, what I was supposed to pay, when, and maybe get the oldest ones paid first, something like that perhaps. So obviously this two-step check writer has a due date, where the demand check writer is you're writing the check right now. There's no putting it in and printing it later. So let's go through here. Let's pick, let's see, I want my billing vendors. Let's pick, I'm going to pretend this is my landlord. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this in. All right, so I choose my vendor. If I don't have an invoice, like I said, we don't fill that out. Here's my landlord. Here's the amount of my rent. I've already got it set up with my default, so it says that this is not a client expense. So I'm going to skip the client section and go to my firm section. Okay, and this is my default came through as being the account rent expense with the amount and my description. Okay, so when you set up a vendor nicely, this happens for you. Now, obviously, there's a lot more spaces here, a lot more fields, many more fields, I think is more proper. And you actually have an endless supply here. So if, for example, this was a credit card statement, you would want to use this check writer because I've never gotten a credit card that only had one expense on it. Okay, this is the main difference between the demand check writer and the two-step, is that demand check writer only had room for one expense account. So this check writer allows you to have as many different accounts as you need. So if this truly was my Visa bill, maybe part of it, probably not rent, I don't think I would put that on my credit card. Maybe meals and entertainment were part of the expense. So I would pull that account and put in how much of my whole bill the meal was. Then I would go get, let's say, dues for my attorneys. Find the dues account, use that one, put in the dollar amount. Okay, and keep going on and on and on until you physically divide it out into all the different types of expenses that you had. Now, obviously, I kind of switched gears here in the middle. This would have been to my credit card. This would have been the full amount of the credit card statement. And perhaps there were client charges on that credit card statement. Maybe I can do filing fees on my credit card. Well, here then, I would utilize my client section and physically divide out all the different matters and the different type of expenses that I had. So maybe this matter did have a filing fee. Okay. And then another matter had a courier charge. So you have endless room here for as many matters as you may need to charge. Okay. With as many different client expense codes, if that's really what's on your credit card bill. And then the remaining amount is for your firm, and you divide that out into all the different kinds of accounts there. One thing I want to say is there's no such account on your chart of accounts called credit card expenses. Please don't do that to yourself, because at year end, when taxes are trying to be finalized, you're going to be going back and trying to figure out every expense on every credit card statement, and we know that's no fun at all. Okay. All right, let's see here. Okay, another good thing here is, I've kind of mangled this one up because I started with one story and ended up with another, is when you have your payable in here. All right, so let me quickly add one here. Let's just quick do it, clerk of court. You can see I have a go-to all the time. All right, say $250. Okay, we'll do this one. Good old Cedar Lake's getting billed a lot today. I'm going to go to my client. I'm going to charge them. Cedar Lake. There we go. Okay, they're getting the whole bill. I'm just going to put one here. Okay, and down here you can see my invoice amount for my general tab was $250. I have now applied $250. So basically I am done because there's no remaining balance, and I hit save. Now it's in the bucket. Okay. The other really cool option or function that this part of the program has is I can get all my client bills in here and all my firm bills, okay? But the idea is I can post all of these before billing. So I get all my client costs in here, then I post them. This goes through and updates my matter billing activity, and I haven't written the check yet from my firm account. So this could help with cash flow, because I can get all of my clients' invoices in here as far as what they owe to pay back to the firm, get them billed over to their matter billing. I still, of course, have to process their bill. There's no magic there. But this part's done. But I don't have to write the check. Where, once again, back to that demand check writer, you're physically producing that check. And, it's coming out of the checkbook if you use that one and you're charging it to a client. So this could help you get all your charges in, charge to the client, and have them waiting to actually print checks. So the next step in that two-step process is print AP checks. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that one. When you do open it up, this is a filter. This is simply saying, who do you want to look at? What vendor would we like to see? Well, I don't always use this, but you could, especially if you work at a PI firm. You may have lots and lots of invoices in here that aren't getting paid until the cases are settled. So maybe you just want to look for that one vendor. You just do a lookup of your vendor, put it in place, and it will only show you those. I'm just going to click on the box so you can see these are all my payables that I have entered and posted at some point, and they're sitting in here waiting to be paid. All right, so now I pick and choose who I want to pay. Obviously, there's an option to select them all, or between your shift key and your control key, you can pick individual ones you want. Okay. You also can do something called splitting. So let's say this is my rent check, okay? And there's a hole in the roof. Well, I got to pay the landlord something, but I'm not going to pay him everything until he fixes the hole in the roof. So I could take this landlord check and I could split it into more than one payment. So let's just say 2. All right, it tries to split it in half. no, I'm not going to pay him that much. I'm only going to give him $500 because I think he'll pay attention and maybe, return my phone call to come fix my roof if I only pay him 500. So I put in the amount I want. It pushes the rest to another payment, but you can continue to split this later if you would like. Save. And now you can see down here at the bottom that $5,000 invoice is now split into two parts. So to physically print, you highlight the ones you do want to pay, click the print button, and now we're back to our options. Well, of course, first it's telling us it's the operating account and the date that will be printed on the check. Are we printing the checks, physically printing those pre-formatted checks? Is this an online payment? Or am I handwriting the check or back filling the check? Okay, so this basically does not print again. You should have these three buttons on your print AP. These three don't appear like this on the demand. They're in different spots. Remember the check bar, the online electronic payment was the check box above the payee. So make sure you understand that on the two different check writers. They don't appear the same for the print process. So there we go. Okay. All right. Now that's down, so we understand setting up our vendors. We understand how to use the two check writers. This is the coolest thing in this entire menu, if you ask me, because this is my life. Anyway, recurring payables. I know when I used this program, it was a pain in the hiney to have to put in that rent check every month, have to put in the cell phone bills for my bosses, have to put in the insurance payments. All that stuff I had to re-enter every single month. Well, there is a shortcut here. It's called recurring payables. You do have to have the vendor set up for any recurring payable. So we still got to do that work. But what you can do is come in here and set up one time those payments that have to be paid every single month, however many times a month you're going to make them. Set them in here with their due date. And then the program will automatically push them, because it's not a posting function. It merges them into the posting area, and you can review them. So you can put in things that vary all the time with a 0-1, with a penny. And you've taken away the majority of the work. All you have to do when they merge is put in the right dollar amount. So how do you get these in here? Okay, well, let's take parking. Okay, I'm going to click on the add button. It's going to ask me for my vendor. So the vendor has to be set up. Then I just put in what day of the month, every month is this due on, because it will automatically find the proper month and year. It just needs to know what day of the month. Then the dollar amount, what it's for, and I have to make the breakout happen. So this is my automobile expense account here from my chart of accounts and the dollar amount. Obviously, there's room to split it out amongst 10 different things. Okay. So you set these up once. My cell phone bill, I put in as a penny. I think my office supply bill I used to have as a penny too, because that changes. All right. So maybe it's not going to be this every month. Let's make that look a little more real. Okay, then what happens is at the first day of the month, you will get a message popping up on your computer when you log in. And it's going to ask you, do you want to merge these payables? Because it will say you have X number of recurring payables. Would you like to merge them now? And this is what the program's doing. You don't have to do this. This is what the program's doing. It's taking all of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, I think, and it's putting in the proper month and year. And you're not pushing these buttons, but this is what it's doing, so you understand. All right, I have an old vendor in here. Let's disregard that. And it will just tell you that it successfully merged however many payables. So what did it do? It took these and it assigned the proper month and year and pushed them into, or merged them into, your enter and post payables with March 2019 and the date of the due date it puts them in here with. So now I'm ready to go. All I have to do is edit this one when I get that bill, put in the proper dollar amount, and post them. All right, so pretend I did that. I just select them and I say post. And now they're all waiting for checks to be written, checks to be printed. That is so much faster, isn't it? Now, of course, you can only do that for firm incurred costs. We can't do that for matters, client incurred cost. So that is one thing we still have to do on our own, but that's still a lot better than having to enter all those all by them, every single month over and over and over again. Okay, let's see. So then, of course, you would go to your second step and print those checks. So you set them up here, it merges them into enter and post, then you post them and you're ready to go print them. You can print them in groups if you'd like. What if you have to void a check? All right, well, let's look at this. It really is pretty simple. You open it up and it knows you're looking at operating because we're under AP, and it simply wants to know the check number. Well, I don't remember the check number. I can't remember anything. So how do I find my check number? All right, just push this up here for a second. Let's go look at our checkbook. So the check register, I keep forgetting they call it check register, not checkbook register. So we're going to open that up. All right, I have a very wide date here to look at. So I should have shortened my dates. Let's do that. You don't want to look at 7 years worth of stuff. Okay, so this is my checkbook register. Here's the date of the transaction, and this is everything in your checkbook, not just AP, right? It's going to have your client payments. It's going to have any journal entries, check numbers, transaction numbers are going to be listed under the check number column. But of course, like I said, there's other stuff in your checkbook. Okay. The CLRD means, have you done your bank reconciliation with these entries? Have they cleared the bank yet? Here's the payee, or in the case of a client payment, you could see the deposit breakdown of whose payment that is. Okay, just to throw that in there. The deposits go in one column. The payments are in the other column. Don't have to worry about those debit and credit words here. Here's the running balance, and of course, our descriptions. All right, so I can see my check number right there, 3034. So I'll back up to my void, put in my check number, click retrieve, and this gives me a little bit about that. So I'm looking at it to be sure I'm voiding the proper thing, okay, the proper transaction. And your accountants would hate me if I said anything but you always void things on the current date. So I don't even, you shouldn't really mess with this at all and just hit void. Are you sure? Give you one more chance. And there you go. Now, one thing that we should know is that if that check, okay, that was a partial payment, so that one's a little bit different. But if it was something that you had entered through enter and post payables, it would reappear in your posting bucket. Okay, so it resets itself up thinking, oh, you had to void it, but you don't want to have to re-enter that thing all over again, especially for a credit card that has 32 accounts that were debited with expenses. It will reset it up, but you can obviously delete that if it should not be here. Okay, that one I gave you was a different kind of thing, so of course that's exception to the rule. But there's the delete button. If you truly are not going to process that payable again, it's not just the fact that the printer went crazy or something like that. You could just, repost it, reprint it. Okay, let's see here. Yes, there are other options under here. You know that we have one-on-one classes, so I could, physically get through every single option on this menu with you and take the time to answer questions in between. The vendor activity, the whole reason for setting up vendors is, besides 1099s, getting the vendor activity. You open this up, you pull up the vendor you want. I'm going to go get clerk of court because I use that one a lot. This is going to show every single payable or demand check that was written or entered if they have not been paid yet. Okay, for the date frame that you're choosing. All right, and give you the invoice number if it was entered. Obviously, the invoice amount, payment amount, if it's been paid, check number or transaction number that it was paid with, the check date, okay, and the matter number if it was so entered. Okay, so this is really our golden apple that we get if we bother to set up vendors. Which brings me back to you should, or I should say you can, not you should, I don't like the should one here, use that miscellaneous vendor. I didn't mention it yet. I never do. I always seem to let that one slip off the end. But when you go to pick your vendor, if you do not have it, or if it's the Girl Scouts, selling cookies, you're probably not going to write them 10 checks this year or have to give them a 1099. So you could say miscellaneous vendor. And when you do so, you just type in who it is you're actually going to write the check to. This does not set them up as a vendor, unfortunately. This just puts them on the check so I can get this check out the door because somebody's tapping me on the shoulder waiting for it, right? Standing there watching me do my work. So yes, you can use it, but remember, no 1099 and no vendor activity. But I will say, if you go back and add them as a vendor, then you can try to sort through and pull it and move it to that vendor code so that you can actually get them on a 1099. But let's not be lazy. Let's set them up first. Now, reconciliation, that's not the topic today, so we're going to stay away from that one. But account payable reports, obviously there's good reports in here. This is my favorite, the cash requirement report, because this tells me how old my debt is. Okay, I think this is the one. This could be the aging one. This tells me everything I do owe. All right, so like I said, money's tight. Have my list. Go in, say who are we going to pay this week. This is going to show everybody that has something in AP. In other words, went through the 2 steps, but the check has not been written. Okay, so let's preview this and take a look. Okay, it does also give aging here. I thought it did. So it's telling you all the information about it. So you can kind of see in the different columns what's here. So you have this to say, okay, by the end of the week, I should pay so and so and so and so and so and such. So that's your reward. Obviously, there's other reports here. I personally like the cash disbursements detail report because it gives you more information than just the cash disbursements listing. The listing's not bad if you're just keeping track of all your check numbers, but this one actually tells you what account out of your chart of accounts was used for the debit side. All right, so that one, I should set these up so it doesn't go on forever before our class. Okay. Oh, great. Don't you love when that happens? All right, that one's being a little persnickety. There it comes. All right, so this is telling you over here under the matter number and the client amount or client matter number and amount who I charged this to. So if I ever need to go back, all right, and void something that's really, really, really old, I can print this report for that date frame and see which matter was affected. Okay. Well, that's about all the talking I'm going to do today, but let's see if I can find any questions over here in our question section. Okay, now this is the part where the screen is so tiny, I have trouble reading it. So if I don't get to your question today, please send it in to webinars@abacusnext.com, and I'll be happy to answer it. If you want to print the online payment in the demand check writer just on paper, my version doesn't. Okay, it should have the printer space in there. Okay, so check your version. Make sure you're on at least 2327. I think they're up to 2328 now. When I uncheck the box, that do not print box, printer doesn't pop up. All right, well, that's the same thing as I was saying. Make sure we're talking about the same check writer, the demand versus the 2-step, because the buttons do look different on those. All right, any other questions? I know you're just going to dream about this tonight and come up with questions in the middle of the night, right? So please submit them to us. And by the way, any ideas you have for webinars, we'd love to hear about those as well. We kind of just go through our list of our different training classes and set up our webinars that way. But if you all come up with ideas that you'd like to see a specific topic, please, that's be a little more fun to do something out of the a little off the beaten path here. But any question is a good question. I'm going to give you my email address just so you have it if you need it. You can reach me at P as in Periwinkle, but just P Lafferty at abacusnext.com. P Lafferty, LAFFERTY at abacusnext.com. Okay. All right, y'all. I really appreciate you attending class today. We have Abacus has 2 of these every week. Please check at the Abacus Next website to see what the next topics will be, and we'd love you to join us. Thank you all so much, and have a lovely afternoon. All right, guys. Bye-bye.